Hello, my beautiful buds. Welcome back to my channel, Sprouts with Joy. My name is Joy, and if you like to talk about plants, you're in the right place. Clearly, I talk about plants a lot on this channel, but if I'm being honest, I do not have equal representation of all of my plants on this channel. I am often talking about the most exciting ones or flashy ones or the plants that other people are talking about. And sometimes I neglect to mention plants that are still good plants that I like, but either they're not quite as exciting to watch grow in the moment, or they kind of fade into the background, or I just kind of forget to talk about them even though I like them as plants. So I wanted to take a second to remedy that. And as I was walking around my collection, I found a lot of plants that I don't talk about enough. Some of these plants I used to talk about more often than I do now, but I definitely recently have not really featured them much on my channel. The first plant I want to feature is my Syngonium erythrophyllum. This is such a gorgeous plant, and when I first got it, I don't think I could shut up about it. I got it it was definitely over a year ago at this point, but then it started sending off runners and it just wasn't growing as nicely. I didn't forget about it, but it kind of lost its like new shine, if that makes sense. But now it's actually growing really well again, but I haven't really talked about it since that started happening. So here he is. He's such a dark plant and so beautiful. And there's like a nice little long vine over here going on. And my favorite part is that the backs of the leaves are more red, which is super, super fun. There's definitely a moment in time where this plant declined a lot. I mean, that's maybe exaggerating. It just kind of stopped thriving for maybe like 6 months at least. During that time, I just sort of stopped paying attention to it. Oh. Yeah, it doesn't really ask that much of me. It's pretty clear when it needs to be watered. It's very communicative. The leaves will deflate a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have any complaints about it other than the fact that there was a period of time where it just shot off a lot of runners, but I just trimmed them off and soon enough, it kind of figured itself out again. I don't even remember if I changed anything. Maybe I was just fertilizing it more consistently, or maybe it was just the fact that summer came around and it was getting more light. That could also very well be the case. But yeah, honestly, I mean, it's growing much better now. It's got some new leaves coming in as well, which is always a nice, happy thing. And overall, I'm happy with it again. It's definitely one of those plants that I've kind of neglected to update you on for some reason. This plant is also a plant that I talked about a lot when I first got it, but I haven't talked about it much since. And that is my Awarenea zebrina. This plant is so cute, and it has continued to grow really, really well. I love the way that it kind of trails down the pot, but I think that I haven't talked about this much because first of all, like, it's more of a succulent like plant, which, don't get me wrong, like, it's a super cool plant, but these plants are not always at the forefront of my mind. Maybe because they're more low maintenance, or maybe because the majority of my collection consists of aroids or Hoya. And so, yeah, I just kind of forget about it sometimes because it's maybe a little bit more understated when it's sitting there on the shelf. But when I look up close, I mean, honestly, this is probably my favorite succulent that I've ever had. I think it's so cool looking. I love its growth pattern, and I would love for it to bloom for me someday. The blooms are really, really cool on this thing, and it's been such an easy grower. It's been so chill and casual. It's super easy to propagate and share too with your friends. So yeah, it's honestly a shame that I haven't been talking about it more. But I think another reason that I don't talk about it is that, I mean, it's growing. Like, all this is new growth. I think when I first got it, it had none of this stuff down here, but the way that it grows isn't particularly noticeable. So it's not like,
oh, a new leaf is unfurling and I'm gonna show you guys.
And it's gonna be on my favorites because I'm noticing that it's putting out lots of new leaves. It just kind of happens. And then before you know it, you look at it again and you're like, wait a minute, you're way bigger than you used to be. Awarenea zebrina, if you're looking to kind of diversify your collection a little bit, you mostly have aroids, it's worth checking out a plant like this. It's a succulent, but it's also not finicky at all. And it's not like your classic kind of rosette pattern succulents like the Echeveria or something like that. So it's a little bit more unique, I think, from your standard succulent. The next plant that I have not featured really on my channel pretty much at all, maybe in like a year, to be honest, is my Marble Queen Pothos. I actually used to be a major Pothos fan, and when I first got my channel started, actually, I have this really old video that's like my Epipremnum collection that still gets views, even though I literally filmed it on my phone. And sometimes when I see people like commenting on it still, I'm like, no, like, that's such old content. Why are you looking at it? But you know, I get it. It's fine. People are nice about it. It's not like people are complaining about the quality or anything like that. I mean, I'm not complaining about getting views. Like, it's nice, but it's also like, that's such an old video and I'm so cringy in it. I don't own half the plants in that video anymore, I feel like. I have actually gotten rid of several of my pothos, and even my golden pothos is not in my house anymore. It's still in the family, but it's living at my husband's office and is totally thriving. But yeah, this is one of like the few pothos that I still keep around, although it's very different from what it used to be. When I got this Marble Queen pothos, it was like my favorite plant because it was massive. I bought it in like a 10-inch pot or something like that, and it grew so long and was really pretty, but it started to get mealybugs every so often, so I sort of impulsively last year decided to unpot the whole thing, chop it up, reroot it, kind of start it over. But a lot of the plants that I created from that ended up dying, and I don't know exactly why, but I'm assuming it was just they were stressed out, and maybe I probably did something wrong because I was a little bit less experienced back then. And also since it had been dealing with a mealybug outbreak, I mean, it was already really stressed out. But this is all I really have left of that plant. It's still really small. Honestly, maybe it could use a repot eventually because it's in a pretty small pot right now, and maybe that would help it to grow. But I still love this plant. In terms of pothos, this is definitely still one of my favorites. I think the Mandula pothos is technically my favorite, and then this one, then maybe the Cebu Blue. I don't know if you would count the Epipremnum pinnatum variegata as pothos. Like in my mind, I don't think of it as pothos, even though it's the same genus. But yeah, I would say like this version is definitely up there. Like the Jade Pothos and like the Neon Pothos are probably some of my like lesser favorites. But this one is really beautiful. But I have noticed, similar to the Mandula Pothos, it takes forever to grow, at least for me. Look at the variegation is beautiful. There is a lot of growth. It's a very nice and full plant, but it's been in this tiny little pot for over a year now, I'm pretty sure. I mean, it's not even really trailing yet. So I just feel like even though it is growing and it's healthy, it's just been
so slow.
So it's like, first of all, pothos aren't even really on my radar anymore as far as plants that I like, even though I have nothing against them. I've just kind of moved on. And number two, it's so slow and nothing's ever really happening. So even though I like this plant, I never really usually have anything to say about it or update on it. I think sometimes I also can't help but compare this plant to some other plants that I see in the store that are also Marble Queen pothos. Like this, I mean, it's still pretty, but it's very yellow and creamy, whereas there are some other Marble Queen pothos that I've seen in nurseries that have really stark white variegation. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty, but it's not the prettiest Marble Queen pothos I've ever seen. So sometimes I'm like, you're not as pretty as you could be. I don't know. And I think that's another reason why I just don't always think about it or appreciate it as much as I probably should. But again, like, it's a nice plant. It's doing well. I have nothing against it. And I think it still deserves some love and it deserves to be featured. This is my Peperomia Hope. And I actually got this relatively recently. I think that this is one of 2 or 3 plants that I've purchased this entire year so far in 2024. And it's adorable. I have thought about getting a Peperomia Hope for a really long time. This is actually probably one of the only peperomias I still have in my collection. I technically have a string of turtles, which is a Peperomia prostrata, and I have another peperomia that a friend gave to me, but I can't think of any other ones that I still have in my collection because I kind of got rid of a lot of them. But yeah, anyway, this is a peperomia that I've always still kind of admired from afar because I think that honestly, as far as peperomia go, this is more up my alley. And yeah, it's really cute. It's actually grown really well for me. I got it as a super tiny plant, and I would say like it's gotten this much growth, like right here, this whole vine and this part, like that's all new growth. But it's one of those plants that is so small and kind of unnoticeable. Like, I don't even know if I gave it a super proper feature when I first purchased it. Like, it wasn't really a part of a video of me buying a plant. I maybe mentioned it offhand in one update video, but that's about it. So yeah, I really have not featured this very much at all because it hasn't stood out to me quite enough to be in a favorites video. And I repotted it, but I don't think I actually repotted it in a video. No, I just haven't talked about it a lot. So here you are. This is my Peperomia Hope. Yeah, it's definitely an underdog. And I think as it gets bigger, I'll probably end up paying more attention to it as it takes up more space and demands more of my attention. But for now, it's just a really cute little thing that just kind of hangs out. This is my Syngonium Frosted Heart, and it was actually a gift from a friend. I don't know exactly why I haven't talked about this plant more often, but I don't know. Maybe it's because it just took a while to get started. But I mean, now, like, this is a recent leaf right here, and it's coming out with a new leaf. So I think that now it's kind of on its way, and I'll probably end up talking about it a bit more, especially as it grows up this moss pole. But you know, it wasn't really doing much originally the first several months that I had it. So there wasn't that much to say or notice. And so I wasn't really noticing it. I was taking care of it, but it's not like,
Oh my gosh, like, so things are happening and I'm excited about it.
but now things kind of are happening, and I do want to point it out. So yeah, obviously it's growing. And I am really genuinely excited to see how this plant does in my collection. And I'm excited to see kind of how it grows and what it becomes, especially going up this moss pole, because I've been through a whole journey with my Syngonium. I generally have resigned myself to not really preferring the genus anymore. I still have several in my collection, but especially Syngonium podophyllum, unless it's like the Syngonium albo, or I do have a Syngonium strawberry milk that I still have, like, I'm holding on to because I like the variegation, like I like the pink stuff on it. But yeah, just the growth pattern of it has frustrated me a lot. They just tend to get so scraggly, and I haven't really found a way that I prefer to grow them. But this is still a Syngonium, but it's very different from the podophyllum. I mean, it's the macrophyllum. It has these like bigger leaves. Maybe because it has like these bigger leaves, it feels better to have it growing up a pole as a single vine, kind of more like a philodendron, versus the podophyllum. You tend to buy them and they've got like multiple vines in the pot, and a lot of people grow them as trailing or just bushy, which over time doesn't really seem to work because they just get so just crazy. And they tend to lose a lot of their bottom leaves and stuff. And I don't know, I just haven't really preferred the way that they look. But this, I honestly am really excited about. So here, I just want to give you a moment to look at it. It's really subtle, but it has like this whitish thing going on with it that I really like. I love the way that the leaves feel. I love the shape. So it's a good plant. And I'm excited to feature it more in the future, especially as it gets bigger and more established. This next plant is my Opuntia, or prickly pear cactus. I don't know much beyond that in terms of its species. So I know that there are like some other subspecies and cultivars of the prickly pear cactus, but yeah, I don't really know much beyond that. But this is a plant that I found at Home Depot during one of my plant shopping videos. I was like doing big box store plant shopping, and it was over a year ago at this point, I'm pretty sure. But I got it. I was really excited. And then I pretty much never really talked about it again. And again, it's not because I dislike the plant, but there was never really anything going on that would justify me featuring it a lot. The one exception was last summer, my daughter knocked the plant over, and it used to have another part of the plant that, you know, it was kind of like growing like a little bunny ear off, whatever.
My brain is not working.
But it was doing this, but like with an old whatever. When I bought the plant, when I bought the plant, it did have another pad that was attached here. I mean, obviously, but unfortunately my daughter knocked it over last summer and it broke off, which I did stick the pad in soil and it's still alive, I think. But I think that a reason I haven't talked about this, other than like something like there not being anything to talk about, was that pretty much all winter, I actually overwintered this cactus in my basement. And obviously when it was in the basement over the winter, like I wasn't seeing it or thinking about it like at all. Nothing was happening. And then I put it outside this summer, and last summer it was also outside. And when my plants are outside, I'll still water them and thinking about them and stuff, but I don't usually bother bringing them inside to film. They're all just kind of out there for the summer, and you know, out of sight, out of mind. When I'm looking around at my collection for things to talk about or update you on, I'm not really thinking about my outside plants as much. So all that to say, there is actually something happening, and you've probably been staring at it this entire time. It's growing a whole new paddle, and this is all new growth since I put it outside at the beginning of May. Isn't that so fun? And it's clearly still growing. I don't want to touch it because it's clearly very prickly, and I don't want that prickle in my finger. But yeah, I'm really excited that it's actually growing, because obviously, yeah, I wasn't really sure how it was gonna work overwintering it. And by the way, when I had it in the basement, it was not in complete darkness. There was a window in the room, but it was cold down there. It was my basement in the winter. It was cold. I wasn't watering it like at all. And so I was a little bit nervous that it wasn't gonna work out. But yeah, I stuck it outside, gave it a good water, and it's growing and happy. I will take it. I think that worked out well for me. Obviously, I'm not like super experienced in it. That was my first time overwintering a cactus and putting it outside, but it was very successful for me. So if you want to experiment with something like that, yeah, go for it, I guess. Next, I wanted to feature a couple of plants from my Maranticia collection, because somebody actually mentioned in my last update video that I made that I was kind of passing over them because I don't know, in the moment they just didn't seem that exciting or notable. But I do really love the plants in my Maranticia collection, and I think that they generally don't get a whole lot of love in the plant community, so I do want to take a moment to feature a couple of them that I feel like I haven't talked about recently, but that I really like and are still like growing and doing things. So first is my red-veined Maranta, or Maranta leuconura erythonera. I mean, look at how stunning this plant is. It's fantastic. I've had it for forever, probably going on 3 years at this point. My friend gave it to me, and it was in very bad shape when my friend gave it to me. But I have, over time, just kind of nursed it back to health. At a few different points, I've taken propagations and potted them back into the pot, repotted it multiple times. And I mean, honestly, it's doing great, clearly. Which sometimes I'm really shocked by, because it's in a corner, like one of these cubbies, but like on the other side of my built-in. It gets so little light, but it's still doing really, really well, honestly. Like the only thing is that since it's not getting as much light, the leaves come in with like less contrast, like they're not quite as bold and beautiful as like these older leaves. But I mean, hey, I'll take it because it looks gorgeous there, but it's still growing. And I mean, it's got so many leaves. Like, look, there's a new leaf right there, and let's see, there's a new leaf right there. I love this plant. It has been nothing but easy for me. I know sometimes people struggle with these a little bit, but honestly, once they get used to your environment, you can kind of get away with a lot as long as you keep up with the watering. So that's key. I think the thing that has helped this plant the most has been that it's in a ceramic pot that retains the moisture. In the past, I had this in a terracotta pot, and it did not like that because it dried out too fast, and it just, no. Even now, I have a lot of other Marantas that are in plastic pots, but they're getting a lot more light, so they dry out quicker, and they just don't like that. Sometimes I'm not able to totally keep up with the watering, and then they end up having leaves that die off. But this one is actually doing maybe even arguably better than my Marantas that are in higher light. Like, it's kind of crazy. I can't believe it. So, I mean, I don't want to prescribe that you put your Marantas in really low light because plants need light to survive. But in my experience, this has actually done really, really well. So yeah, I don't know why I don't talk about this plant more often, because I absolutely adore it. It's definitely one of my favorites in the Maranticia collection, and I love like the redness to it too. I mean, it's got red backs, and like, that's just, it's such a cool and gorgeous plant. I love the growth pattern of Maranta too, especially when they start kind of trailing a little bit. Yeah, I love it. And then I said I was going to talk about 2 plants in my Maranticia collection. So the next one is my Gapertia zebrina. And now this one has not been entirely on my good side recently because it's been fighting mealybugs, which is just annoying. I have a number of plants in my collection that have been popping up with mealybugs, which, like, I'm not terribly afraid of them, but sometimes they're a little bit tricky to get rid of if they're like really stubborn about it. I probably should get a little bit more aggressive with my treatment, but I've just been so busy and I'm not like overly concerned, so I've been, you know, treating it as I see it, but also not super duper aggressive and regimented about it. But anyway, yeah, so this has been one of my plants that has been dealing with a few mealies, but even in spite of that, like, it still honestly looks really good. It's still putting out new growth. Like, this is a new leaf that's absolutely massive. Do you see that? It's gorgeous. This is a brand new leaf, and it's got some new leaves also coming out, like over here. It's a good plant. I actually think I'm gonna need to repot it soon because it's been drying out really quickly. But this is definitely another one of my favorite plants in my Mary TCA collection because I just love how the leaves are. I mean, the pattern is so gorgeous. I've had some ups and downs with it. It also has had spider mites in the past, so we've dealt with some pests, and it's had some moments where it threw fits and stuff, but honestly, we've been going pretty strong for a little while now, with the exception of the mealybug issue. But yeah, the leaves are velvety and gorgeous. I mean, come on. It's living in the middle of my table, so I think that sometimes I forget to talk about it because in my mind it's almost like decoration or like a bouquet of flowers that you might keep on your table. So it's not like with all of the rest of my plants in my collection. Like, for example, in my greenhouse cabinet, all those plants I'm really actively thinking about in relation to one another. I'm looking at them all the time. But this one, it's like almost, since it's the centerpiece, you almost become blind to the centerpiece. Does that make any sense? So yeah, I think that that's what happens to me with this plant, even though I love it. Honestly, it's not absolutely perfect in every single way, but it is a solid plant, and I like it a lot. The last plant that I'm gonna talk about today is my Sansevieria sayuri, which sits on the floor in this little basket. And honestly, I should probably get a plant stand for it because I feel like the poor thing is just kind of in the corner and it's a little bit forgettable because it's not at eye level, like, whatsoever. But this plant has honestly been so good to me. I've had it for a year now. And as far as snake plants go, this has probably been my favorite one that I've ever owned. And I'm not generally a huge snake plant fan usually, but this one has been a really steady grower for me. I mean, if you look at the bottom, it's kind of a paler color and it looks very fresh. This is a new leaf, like a very recent new leaf. And this one is as well, right here. Isn't that so beautiful? So yeah, this is a very like understated plant. It's got like a little bit of that variegation to it, that stripiness, but it's also not super attention grabbing either. Like, it's nice when you look at it up close, but I'm not staring at it from across the room all day. But yeah, I mean, it grows consistently, but since it is more of a slower grower, you know, I'm not really thinking about it all the time. And it also does not need very much from me at all. I water this thing maybe once a month. And yeah, it trucks along totally fine. Getting watered once a month, getting like very medium light, not that much attention. It's actually right next to my kid's high chair, so my son will like chuck food, and sometimes when I go to water it, I'll like see dried up food in it. I'm like, oh, that's gross. But also, yeah, it's just hanging out here, okay? Since it doesn't need very much from me and it doesn't need a whole lot of care, again, I just don't think about it that often. But I mean, who doesn't love a plant that doesn't ask that much of you and still looks good? Yeah, it's cute. I like it. Obviously, again, snake plants are not my huge thing. I know some people love snake plants and specifically collect them. So it's definitely an underdog. I wish I paid it more mind. I think I said that that was gonna be the last one, but it's not, because this is my last one. And I almost forgot it. How sad is that? Okay, this is my Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. And listen, this plant is putting in the work. It totally pulls this room together. When people come into the house, this is the first plant that they notice. I mean, you can only see part of it right now, but it's climbing up the wall. Yeah, it's all the way to the ceiling. And to be fair, I am a little bit overwhelmed or like daunted as to what I want to do with this plant, because since the pot is on the floor, like, listen, I've tried potting up propagations into that pot that's on the floor, but my toddlers have ripped out the propagations that are not, you know, fully established and rooted and stuff. And so I just was like, I'm just not gonna bother trying to make it fuller. But here it is still hitting the ceiling and it's still trying to grow. And I've chopped it multiple times, given away propagations to friends. But at a certain point, I just don't feel like chopping it anymore. So I think I'm in like a weird funk with this plant. But other than that, I mean, I do love the way that it looks. I love having it here. and it's a super fast grower. Honestly, I'm shocked it's still alive because I've forgotten to water it a number of times, because again, it's one of those plants that feels a little bit more like a sculpture or art piece almost, the way that it is. I don't know why, but it's done really, really well under those circumstances for me. I think another reason that I haven't talked about it a whole lot is because I can't move it. Actually, the same thing has happened to my monstera. Like, it's an iconic plant. I love it, but it's so big. I'm not wanting to bring it to wherever I'm filming. And I could get B-roll, but it's just not as fun to not be holding the plant that I'm talking about. So that's definitely another reason. Like, the plants that are a little bit more permanent in their spaces, I'm more reluctant to include in videos or talk about, or I don't even really consider adding them, because again, like, this is their spot and they don't really move from here. But honestly, it deserves more of a spotlight, because if you're looking for plants to make your house look like a jungle, oh my gosh, Rhaphidophora tetrasperma is for you. It is wonderful. It's a delightful plant. Whew, wow, that was a lot of plants. But I really enjoyed making this video and taking a moment to feature some plants that don't get a whole lot of attention from me all the time, at least not in my videos and in my content. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe. All those things are super helpful for my channel, and I hope that you have a wonderful and blessed day. Bye-bye!